Welcome to the FCM conference held here in Regina, Saskatchewan. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we're gathered is Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. It's a pleasure and frankly an absolute privilege to be hosting FCM's Big City Mayor Caucus today. This caucus is one of the country's strongest voices for progress. Not just for Canada's cities, not just for the big cities, but for municipalities of all sizes. The work this caucus does with our federal partners, it has driven historic progress, unprecedented investments in infrastructure, transit, and housing. Now we're looking for the future of our country, the next steps that we need to take for recovery. Meeting today with Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure, and Communities Minister Dominic LeBlanc, we will be focused on further action on housing affordability and the economic recovery. Today's conversations center on one question: how do we work together to build an inclusive, sustainable country and to get more done for Canadians? I would like to now turn it over to President of the BCMC, Mike Savage.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I am Mike Savage, the Mayor of Halifax. Je suis Mike Savage, la Maire de Halifax, and also the Chair of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Big Cities Caucus. First of all, I want to thank Mayor Masters for your amazing hospitality. It was good to see you in Halifax a month ago, but it's awesome to be here in this, the beautiful city of Regina, and also pleased to be joined by Laval Mayor Stéphane Boyer. Our caucus is meeting all day as part of FCM's Together for Recovery conference. This is the fullest national gathering of municipal leaders since 2019, and we're really glad to be back, mostly in person and some online. Over the past 2 years, the pandemic has emphasized how much community matters to our economy and to our daily lives. Our cities is where Canadians live, work, learn, raise their families. As mayors, we are here to work for the people and for the businesses as we gear up for the recovery. Cities are central partners in Canada's future, and we have an opportunity to tackle some of the biggest challenges that Canadians face right now. We're here today to talk about the priorities that Canadians deeply care about, and fixing the housing crisis is top of mind for our residents and for us. We all agree more needs to be done to fix this crisis. Cities across the country are doing their part to expand the right kind of housing supply, from rentals that can't be converted to condos to affordable housing, which is beyond what markets can provide. We're prioritizing solutions that bring concrete changes to our communities. We know what's needed in our communities, and we know what works in our cities, and we're maximizing the tools and the investment that we have. Clearly, we cannot do it alone. It will take all orders of government working together and working better to tackle this challenge. So this afternoon, we're going to have a discussion with Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities Minister Dominic LeBlanc to talk about action on housing affordability. And we're also pleased that we'll be joined by Minister Hussein, who's done a tremendous amount of work on the issue of housing. Ensuring people have access to many kinds of affordable homes is crucial to economic growth and to our country's recovery. Today we'll focus on an important piece of the broader housing puzzle. How can we maximize new federal investments in housing supply? And first and foremost, the Housing Accelerator Fund. Announced in the last federal budget, this new fund of $4 billion has the potential to deliver real housing solutions. It can help get housing built faster through direct and flexible investments, but only if it's designed together, with speed and results in mind. We believe that this fund can empower municipalities to tackle the most serious local barriers to supply, like access to financing, the availability and cost of land, regulations to review and approve development applications. But let's be clear, this federal fund is a major step. It's something cities want to immediately develop with the federal government, but we know more is needed than just this fund to fix the housing crisis. As I said, every single order of government has a role in addressing this challenge, as do the not-for-profit organizations in our communities and of course the private sector. We need to be at the same table in order to drive outcomes, to create more affordable rental supply and deliver deeper affordability across the entire housing spectrum. Canadians don't want to know who's responsible for what. They don't care. What they want to see is results. They want to see change, and that's where we deliver. As the order of government closest to people's daily lives, cities know what their residents need. Getting it right on housing is critical for our most vulnerable people who need a place to call home, and it's crucial to building flourishing communities. Progress on housing is directly related to progress on transit, as well as reducing emissions and making sure that we have the core infrastructure in place to meet those needs. The Big City Mayors Caucus is firmly committed to pursuing these housing goals under that holistic approach. You know, the pandemic has shown us how acute and dire the need is for affordable cities. The war in Ukraine and other conflicts around the world are pushing hundreds of thousands of refugees out of their countries. It reminds us that we not only need to address national challenges like the housing crisis for ourselves, but also for those who will choose Canada in search of a better life. Because everybody in this country should have access to a safe and affordable place to call home. And cities are committed to working with all partners to make this a reality. With the right tools, cities are recovery drivers and nation builders. When governments work together, we move this country forward. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Stéphane Boyer.
Bonjour tout le monde. Alors, premièrement, laissez-moi remercier la mairesse Masters pour votre hospitalité ici à Regina. C'est un plaisir d'être ici et en compagnie également de notre président, M. Savage. C'est la plus importante rencontre d'élus municipaux au Canada, et ce, depuis 2019. Et donc, pour nous, c'est un moment important aujourd'hui et dans les prochains jours de pouvoir discuter de l'avenir de nos villes. On a vu durant la pandémie à quel point nos communautés ont été affectées. On a vu à quel point la vie a changé sous plusieurs aspects. Nos parcs municipaux sont plus utilisés que jamais. Au début, on avait peur pour nos entreprises, pour la récession. Finalement, ce qu'on vit, c'est surtout une pénurie de main-d'œuvre. On a vu aussi le logement, à quel point le prix de l'habitation en général a augmenté. Et un des enjeux principaux qu'on veut discuter aujourd'hui, c'est justement quelles sont les solutions qu'on peut mettre de l'avant pour offrir un logement à prix décent à l'ensemble de la population. Donc, c'est plus juste une question de logement social subventionné, c'est aussi une question de qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour l'ensemble des familles, l'ensemble des citoyens. Parce que ce soit quelqu'un qui paye un loyer ou que ce soit une famille, un jeune couple qui veut acquérir une propriété pour la première fois, c'est de moins en moins accessible. Et c'est plus juste un enjeu des grands centres urbains comme Vancouver et Toronto, c'est rendu un enjeu qu'on vit dans toutes nos provinces, dans toutes nos municipalités. Alors, on est vraiment dédié, focusé à trouver des solutions. Alors aujourd'hui, on va rencontrer le ministre Dominique Leblanc, ministre des Infrastructures et des Collectivités, pour discuter justement de ces enjeux-là en sa compagnie, parce qu'on sait à quel point c'est un enjeu qui est fondamental, qui est crucial pour nos familles. Et on souhaite dire à ceux qui nous écoutent aujourd'hui que vos maires, que vos mairesses, partout à travers le Canada, vous ont entendu et sont conscients des enjeux que vous devez vivre. Et on souhaite faire tout ce qu'il faut pour régler les défis et aider les familles à avoir un logement plus abordable. Ça va nous permettre d'avoir des collectivités aussi plus viables, plus vitales, où la culture, la restauration va pouvoir prospérer, parce que si on met tout notre argent dans le loyer, il nous en reste plus gros par la suite pour inscrire nos jeunes à des activités sportives ou sortir à des activités culturelles. Et donc, c'est un exemple d'enjeu parmi tant d'autres qu'on va adresser ici aujourd'hui. Alors, je vous remercie, Mme Masters, M. Savage, et je serai disponible s'il y a des questions en français. Merci. Ms. Savage.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, we'll take them now.
Hi, Mayor Masters, Mayor Savage. Both Regina and Halifax have recently seen a growth in the unhoused population in both cities. The two cities have kind of dealt with it in two different ways. Regina has established an interim shelter, and Halifax has purchased modular units and set them up on municipal property. Do you think that municipal governments have a bigger role to deal with unhoused people? Do they have a bigger role and more active role to play?
Maybe I'll go first. I think that municipal governments are recognizing that, as I said in my comments, that people don't want to hear about jurisdiction. They frankly don't want to hear about political parties. What they want to see is solutions. And so when it comes to both housing and homelessness, and specifically on the homeless file, we have to find ways to work with other orders of government. In Halifax, for example, we spent $5 million on modular units, and then the provincial government stepped in to provide wraparound support. I think we all recognize that we want to be a partner. And as we go to other orders of government and ask for support through the Housing Accelerator Fund, for example, we're prepared to do our part, both in terms of supply of housing and also on homelessness. We really do need the other orders of government to step up and do more. But I think you'll find that municipalities across the country are prepared to help. So, the Rapid Housing Initiative is an example, which is a great model, which in Halifax has so far produced 130 units of housing for people who otherwise most likely would not have been housed. That's the kind of thing that we can work with, and in Halifax we've done well with the federal government and the provincial government, as well as the not-for-profit organizations, and even some support from the private sector in terms of advice has been a good model. So I think, from our point of view, we're prepared to do more, absolutely. But it's a huge national problem. We have a model in the Rapid Housing Initiative of providing money directly to municipalities and saying, look, we trust you to be part of the solution, and I think that that's what we want to see with the Housing Accelerator Fund. It has the potential to be really transformative for this country. Mayor Masters?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will just echo Mayor Savage's comments. I know here in the city it was actually a community-based organization, the provincial government and the City of Regina, who partner not just on the interim shelter, but the transition into low-barrier supportive housing. And so as we continue to build on that type of model, it does require all levels of government. It's not something municipalities can do on our own, but I think what you're hearing from municipalities is we're prepared to play our part. We need the other levels of government to play theirs as well.
You want me, maybe peut-être que je peux le dire en français. Donc, un peu pour reprendre les propos de mes collègues, en effet, les villes, on est prêtes à jouer notre part dans l'équation. On est prêtes pas seulement à mettre de l'argent pour trouver des solutions pour nos citoyens, mais aussi à faire de l'introspection puis à dire comment est-ce qu'on peut être plus agile, comment est-ce qu'on peut réduire les délais d'octroi de permis, comment est-ce qu'on peut être plus agile dans la délivrance des permis. Mais c'est un jeu qui se joue à plusieurs. L'habitation au Canada, c'est une question multipalier et c'est parfois complexe. Et on est conscient que les citoyens, au final, ils ne veulent pas entendre parler de cette complexité-là ou de quelle juridiction est-ce que les enveloppes dépendent. Ce qu'ils veulent, c'est surtout qu'il y ait de l'action sur le terrain. Et on est ici aujourd'hui pour transmettre ce message-là. Les villes, on répond présent, on est prêt à en faire plus, on est prêt à aller plus vite, mais on a besoin également de la collaboration du provincial et du fédéral. Il y a d'ailleurs un 4 milliards mis sur la table par le fédéral, qui est une mesure qu'on salue, une très bonne mesure. Et ce qu'on souhaite et ce qu'on va discuter avec le ministre cet après-midi, c'est comment s'assurer que cet argent-là puisse se rendre rapidement sur le terrain pour apporter des solutions au logement.
Hey, Mickey here with the Canadian Press. I have one question, and I'm going to do a follow-up, if that's okay. How have you seen housing needs change coming out of the pandemic, and what more do you need from the federal government?
Oh, good question. Thank you for that question. Yeah, of course, I don't know if housing it's created some homelessness, but it's really shone a light on homelessness that existed and has been accelerated during the pandemic, for sure. And what we need from the federal government is we need a partner. And I have to say that the federal government have put a lot of money into housing. We didn't have a national housing strategy in this country from, the early to mid-90s till, 4 or 5 years ago. So there's been some very good work done on that. But what we need is a recognition from the federal government that, we all want the same thing in terms of supply of housing, but specifically on homelessness. We need to have solutions that make sense for people who need that help. It needs to be regular funding. It needs to be sat down with people who are stakeholders. FCM has been very involved in discussions with the federal government on the Accelerator Fund. Obviously, it needs to be transit-oriented. It needs to be environmentally responsible. But it also really needs to recognize that, as I've said, for many years, that when it comes to housing and homelessness, the feds have the money, the province have the jurisdiction, the cities have the problem. And so we all need to be at the table at the same time. And I think there's some good steps coming. We really anticipate good things with the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's not just housing, but the right kind of housing. And then cities like ours and others are looking at things like inclusionary zoning, which will increase supply, but will also drive affordability through the process. And I think that the solutions are there. We just need everybody to come together and figure them out.
And this is kind of off topic, but are any of your communities pushing to decriminalize illicit drugs, and why?
Well, certainly there's been a lot of discussion around the decriminalization of illicit drugs. I think all of our cities have had the problem, and I think we all believe in harm reduction and measures that, you know, make sense, that don't criminalize people who have addictions and mental health issues. So we're open to conversations about that, but we're not here to talk about that today. We recognize we've already had a conversation about downtowns and what's happening post-pandemic with the challenges of downtowns. At the root of it all is housing. And if we can house people, whatever their circumstances, give them a place to sleep at night so they can wake up and have some kind of a plan for the next day instead of wondering where they're going to go, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, hi, it's John Cairns from SAS Today and Glacier Media. I'm just curious about the issues of the supply chain and just want to get a sense about how much of a challenge that is for you in terms of getting construction started, getting housing started, and we keep on hearing about inflation and those pressures. So how much of a challenge is it? And just get some thoughts.
I think it's a very big challenge. There's no question about that. You know, I heard somebody say today, perhaps Mayor Tory, that, you know, building affordable housing is becoming unaffordable because of the cost, because of supply chain issues, and because of the lack of skilled labor. And I think in some ways the growing number of people who come here from other countries, a lot of them will help us build the housing. So there are people that may think, well, that's going to be more of a demand on housing, and it will be, but it will also help us deal with that issue. So absolutely, supply chain issues are big. Private sector, public sector, everybody's dealing with those issues. It's having an impact on the rapid housing initiatives in my community, and I think communities around the country. So it's a big issue. At the same time, I think we all have to focus on what can we do to improve the situation. What can we do to increase supply, and what can we do to increase affordability? There's not a lot we can do about supply chain issues except acknowledge that they're there and make sure that we're doing everything we can possibly do to fix the situation, because it is a crisis.
Yeah, I'm just curious about what the upper levels of government might be able to do, federal, provincial governments, might they be able to provide tax breaks, or what would you be looking for then?
Well, I think those are solutions that make sense under any circumstance. You know, what can we do? What can municipalities do? In Halifax and I know other places, we're you know, forgiving permit fees and license fees for housing that's being built for affordable housing. So I think every order of government can look at what they do and what their components are for their housing. Supply chain issues and labor challenges, I think, are international. And, you know, but there's other solutions that we can all look at our component of the housing chain and say, how do we help and reduce the cost through there?
Morning, Mayors. Also, you guys heard a pitch today from the Public Safety's Minister about Bill C-21 and the gun violence bill and what they're doing to try to mitigate that. What did you hear from him, and what are your thoughts about it? Obviously, both your cities deal with a little bit of gun violence in itself, and what did you guys feel, both Regina and Halifax, about his pitch today?
So we appreciate Minister Mendicino coming to speak to us today. This legislation is new this week. It addresses an issue that's very important. We as FCM will look at legislation as we always do and get more information in terms of what the actual impacts will be and what benefits it will derive. We're not going to take a position today on that. A number of mayors are supportive of it. I personally am supportive of what we're seeing, but that's me as a mayor of Halifax, and not even speaking on behalf of my council, but myself. But I think we'll continue to look at it as FCM will, as we always do, as be a partner in these kind of measures. We do acknowledge, I think all of us have seen increasing gun crime in our communities. And there's a lot of elements to it, from, you know, guns coming into the country illegally. And so there's a lot of issues, domestic violence, gender violence. These are all things that are components of the package, and we'll be all making our own decisions on that, but we will look to FCM to filter back some of the potential impacts. I don't know if anybody else wants to have a go on that.
Good afternoon, Troy Charles with Global News. For Mayor Masters, just talking about the Accelerator, possible Accelerator funds and affordable housing in Regina, where do you see the biggest gaps are right now, and how that would preferably be allocated, and with other funding as well in the future?
Well, we've been waiting for a little bit more details on the design of the program, but I think one of it is about getting housing stock to market as quickly as possible. Some of that will be internally focused. Some of the plan is for municipalities to develop better, faster skills in terms of getting stock to market. I think that not unlike every other city across our country, the bringing more on stream and getting more built is actually paramount. We've been notified that we're going to start to run into a housing crunch more so here, and so really trying to get out in front of that and engaging with our builders, with our planning and development departments. So we're interested in the program because anything that will help invest in our turnaround times getting faster and just allowing for more development is, we know, is absolutely necessary right now.
Questions about the playoffs, the hockey playoffs, Blue Jays?
Kill you to say that.
Les questions en français. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I appreciate it. It's great to be in Regina.